Apparently, booking a seat on the train is not a real booking if someone else decides to sit there. I was traveling from Edinburgh to London by train and had a booked window seat with a table. I got on the train to find 4 guys sitting at the table. The one in my seat that was clearly marked as booked refused to move as he was with his friends and the train was packed. The ticket collector passed and I asked him to help. He asked the guy to move, but he refused, and somehow that was that. "So what now?" I asked. "You can find another seat, but I have no power to move him. Only the police can move him, and they will not turn up just to move someone out of a seat." There were no seats free in the carriage, and probably not many free on the train, so standing to London was a possibility. "I'm going to take a seat in first class. Better surroundings, power sockets, and free tea and coffee." "You can't sit there. You don't have a booking." "Well, you could call the police to move me, but apparently they won't turn out to move someone out of a seat." I had a lovely trip with power for my laptop and a wide, comfy seat. Neighbor took my parking spot after I shoveled. I poured water in his windshield. It was a cold winter day. 8 inches of snow had fallen the night before, and the wind chill made it feel as if it were in the negatives, Fahrenheit. I drive an all-wheel SUV, so I have no issues getting out. My wife, on the other hand, drives a Prius, which slides with the smallest amount of moisture on the road. My car was down at the time, so we had to take my wife's car. I spent 45 minutes in the freezing cold shoveling that car out so we could get to the store. We were gone for an hour, and when we came back, our neighbor had taken the spot I had shoveled. Our apartment complex doesn't have assigned parking, but in the winter, it's understood that if you shovel a spot, it is yours. So when I saw his car in the spot I had just shoveled, I was pretty pissed. I went inside and filled 2-gallon jugs of water, went back out and poured them on his windshield. Rinse and repeat. I must have poured about 10 gallons of water on his car. Being how cold it was already freezing by the time I poured the last gallon on. It sat like that overnight. The next morning, I got to watch as he helplessly tried to scrape all the layers of ice off his windshield. Don't take my goddamn parking spot. Entitled Parker parked in my driveway, so I blocked them in and got drunk all weekend. Friday night, I came home from work to find someone on our block was having a large party, and someone decided they were entitled to park in my driveway. Keep in mind my driveway is a single car width, lined with a retaining wall on both sides and a garage at the end. Essentially impossible for a tow truck to come pull them out without property damage. Seeing this and the lack of street parking, I took this as a cue to park right behind them in my driveway. Now, a few hours go by and their entitled parker is now knocking at my door demanding I move my car so she can leave. Seeing as they were demanding, I informed them that I had been drinking and would not move my car. The entitled parker then decides to call the police to get them to force me to move. When the police knocked on my door, I was sure to grab a beer from the fridge before I answered to talk to the officer. I had informed him that after I got home I was unwinding and had been drinking and was in no shape to drive. At this point, their hands were tied because they couldn't tow her car out. I'm in no shape to drive, and I'm legally parked in my driveway. I ended up telling the entitled parker that since it's a long weekend, I would be on a weekend-long bender, and they could come move my car after I go to work on Tuesday. I exposed an affair because it was affecting my sleep. So I'll start with understanding what I did wasn't exactly right, but I regret nothing. TLDR, my upstairs neighbor is having an affair and it's disrupting my sleep, so I found the wife online and messaged her. Problem solved. My upstairs neighbor has been having an affair with a married man for about 4 months now. I wouldn't care, but because it's an affair that comes over at odd hours of the night and they have sex very loudly, I can hear a lot, and it wakes me up / prevents me from sleeping. How do I know it's an affair? He's never spent the night and his car has baby car seats in there. Some backstory, I have had issues with my upstairs neighbor prior to this. She would throw parties on Monday nights. She gets home at 2 a.m. from work, pacing her condo and having loud phone conversations. She's 40 years old, throwing parties with 20-year-olds and having affairs and living like a teenager. I tried to talk to her like a normal person about my concerns, but she doesn't care, and I've had to get the association involved to stop the parties. I hate her. So I decided to learn some more about this mystery man. I looked up the license plate, found an address, searched the address, and found a name. Took the name and did some social media stalking and found the man in his wife's profiles. I made a throwaway account, messaged the wife about the affair. I haven't seen him now for a few weeks, and I'm sleeping really nicely. Total Wine would not sell me the specific wine I drove 60 miles to that location for because they claim I was with someone else who left, and they needed to see ID for that person. I was alone. So I made a mobile order of $10,000 and never picked it up. There's a specific wine I use to pair with food, and the closest Total Wine that had it was a 60-mile drive, and it was storming out, and I wanted it for the holidays because most likely I was going to end up being cooped up inside. So I drive over. This used to be my typical Total Wine until I moved 2 counties away. Anyways, I go in and I pick up the wine and I get some other stuff for holiday parties. And I was in there for maybe an hour, and it comes time to check out, and the cashier asked me for my ID. So I give it to her, and then she tells me that she needs to see the ID of the other person that I was with. So now I'm confused, and I say, I'm alone? And she says, well, I gotta go get my manager. Okay, fine. So he comes out to tell me that she told him I was with someone and they need to come back and bring their ID or they won't sell it to me. I told him I wasn't with anyone. He asks to see my ID, looks at it, and says, well, unfortunately, you look young. At this point, I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, you can come back tomorrow alone. I find it extremely disrespectful to tell someone they look young while they're holding your ID in their hand, and not to mention, I have been shopping at that exact location for about 4 years and have never had a problem. So I told him about how I drove there and have been shopping there for years, and that I even have a second form of ID, and he was just kind of giggling and saying, no. So I left very angry, and it was late, around 9 p.m., and then I had the about hour-and-a-half drive back home in the rainy, stormy weather. So I was home pissed about it all night, and the next day I went into the one close to my house to get the other stuff I was getting. Unfortunately, that one was out of the wine. That's why I didn't originally go there. They were pleasant as usual, actually beyond nice, and didn't even ID me, which just goes to show the other location was on some kind of power trip or something. Then I got an email from them to review my experience, which they send every time I go there, and I never do it, but I decided to select the location I had the bad experience at and give feedback on it. So I wrote exactly what happened, and then the next day I got a call from the store manager. Turns out, the guy that night was an assistant manager or something. However, he was much more pleasant than the woman that called me. She was extremely rude and condescending and told me that she reviewed the cameras and that someone walked in with me at the same time and that made us a party. I told her I didn't know them. She said it didn't matter. So apparently people can't walk into Total Wine at the same time as you? And then she said that the employees were watching me and that the other person left 30 minutes before I went to check out and they saw it. Okay, so? Also, if that's the case and that's your policy, why didn't you say something when you saw the person leave and we could have cleared up the whole situation right then and there? Instead of continuing to allow me to shop for another 30 minutes and waste my time to know that when I came to check out you were just going to deny it. So I told her, even if that is the case, someone couldn't leave a store? And she said no. To complete the transaction, they would have to drive back with their ID. This made me extremely angry because even if that's the case, and that is your policy, at least you can offer an apology for the inconvenience or something like that. Not just call me to argue and stir the pot. I was already kind of over it because it had been like 2 days, but just her whole attitude and nastiness about the whole thing was really an insult to injury. So I decided to look up their policy, and their policy clearly states that this only applies to parties at checkout. So the rule is who's with you at checkout, which makes so much more sense. Or is at least more understandable. Another policy I read about, which was interesting, was that any online order not picked up within a week, they will issue a full refund to your original payment method. So, my friends and I were sitting at home drinking the stuff I had gotten the other location that day and telling them what they happened. They were all shocked. I used to work for retail for a long time, specifically during COVID, and I know what an inconvenience it is to set up big curbside pickup orders because they take up a lot of space on the order shelf. So drunk and mad, I decided to reinforce their own policy on them and make a $10,000 order for the soonest possible pickup, which they promised would be ready in 3 hours. So I made sure to order the cheapest, heaviest bottles I could think of so it would take up the most amount of space on their curbside, and made sure to only order like 1 or 2 of each so they couldn't just give me a case. They had to get individual ones, and I ordered their whole supply of Tito's since it's popular, and it's the holidays, and I know people are going to be looking for it, and this Total Wine has its curbside order section in the front behind a counter where you can see it. And I know when customers saw it, they would ask for it, and then they would have to explain how someone ordered all 238 bottles and they're back there on reserve. Then they'd probably get grouchy and ask for a manager. But the manager would be busy because I also made sure to order a lot of bottles behind glass so that they would have to run around with their keys scrambling to get the order ready. I worked retail, and I know how much this stuff throws off a schedule and annoys the managers. So I loaded up a cart and then stopped when I got bored and placed the order. I got the email confirmation, which specified that you have to wait for the pickup confirmation email and that pickup times are not guaranteed, so I thought for sure they were either going to cancel the order or call me or something. And something interesting that is sent with the email is a pickup policy that states specifically the recipient of the order needs to be 21. So you can have other people in your car not 21? Well, 5 hours later, I got the pickup email. It took them longer, but I was still surprised. Then later, I got a pickup reminder email. Then 3 days later, a second reminder. Then 7 days, I got my final notice email. And then day 10, I got a phone call. It was the manager acting like a completely different person this time, asking when I was coming in for the order. At this point, I think she knew I was fucking with them because it had been 10 days and she knew my name for the previous feedback thing because when she called, she asked for me by name, and my name was on the order. So I told her, yeah, I went to pick it up and I was told that I looked too young, so I just went to the other Total Wine and picked up the same stuff there. So then she was mad and said, are you seriously not coming to pick this up? Lol, restock. I just said, nah. She hung up. When your higher up asked you why your store had to refund someone $10,000, explain to them what you did. Lama-fa-fa-fow. They were supposed to automatically cancel the order at the 7-day mark, but she didn't call me at the 10-day. So I called their customer service line to cancel it, and she told me that some stores wait to the end of the month to do it. I'm assuming the manager was trying to hold out on refunding to the end of the year on a better number. Retail does that. I made them cancel it right then. LMFAOOO. A barmaid laughed at my drink order. I was on holiday with my son, who's 14, and we were watching the football in a bar in the evening. I don't really drink, but do enjoy a cocktail while on a holiday. The server came by and asked if we wanted drinks. I asked for a piña colada, and then she sniggered a little at the order and kind of laughed out an okay and then walked off to make it. This annoyed me a little. I'm just a grown man wanting to drink a tasty cocktail. What's wrong with that? When she brought the drink back, I got my petty revenge. As she was placing the drink on the table, I said, my mom loved these, God rest her. I always have one on the anniversary of her death to remember her. She looked horrified and tried to shuffle off so quickly, so I asked her for a cocktail stir, so she had to come back again. And when she came back, I took a sip from the straw, kissed my hand, pointed to the sky, trying to look sad. She was so visibly uncomfortable, I had to stifle my own laughter. She noticed that we avoided our table multiple times after this. Want to block my driveway, officer? It's gonna be another minute or two on coffee. About a decade ago, I worked an early morning shift at a fast food restaurant. We opened at 6 a.m., so I had to be at work at 5 a.m. I would leave my house at about 4:45 a.m. every morning. My management was pretty relaxed about the opening shift. Clocking in up to 10 minutes late wasn't really an ordeal, as long as you showed up ready to go. I came outside at 4:45 to find that a local police officer had pulled someone over and is now blocking my driveway. This has happened before, but normally in the afternoon, and normally I just ask the officer to move forward or back a couple of feet and then I pull out of the driveway, no sweat. This officer, however, angrily informs me that I have to wait until he's done. I snap a picture of his car, text my manager, and explain my tardiness. 40 minutes later, the police officer finally moves, so I scramble into the car and head to work. I get there 15 minutes before we open. I frantically start to brew tea, fetch ice, have to condense my 50-minute routine into 15 minutes. I almost forgot to brew coffee. Opening time rolls around, and the first group of customers come in. It's a group of our local police officers, led by the captain. I guess they're about to do a shift change. One of the officers in the group is the one who blocked my driveway. Anyway, the captain orders coffee, and I regretfully inform him that there's a 5-minute wait on coffee because I got to work extremely late. Captain asks why, so I pulled up my phone and explained that one of his officers blocked my driveway for 45 minutes for a routine traffic stop. Captain proceeds to chew out that officer in front of all his colleagues and exclaims that nothing short of a life-or-death emergency should block my driveway if it'll interfere with him getting his morning coffee. It was never blocked again, and the captain always got his coffee at 6 a.m. without interruption. Ruin my wedding to propose? I'll ruin your proposal. I, 35 male, have a young brother, Todd, 29 male, who had a complicated birth and had to stay a month in the ICU, and because of that, my parents have always doted on him and almost denied him nothing, even if it was to the detriment of my sister, Abby, 32 female, and I. My brother drinks the attention up, and he has, on more than one occasion, made himself the center of attention at either my sister's or cousin's special event. Because of this, Abby and I have a strained relationship with Todd and our parents. Unfortunately, Todd met and fell in love with Lucy, 24 female, who announced her own pregnancy at the baby shower my mom held for Abby. When I proposed to my wife, Michelle, 30 female, I just wanted to elope, but she really wanted her family to be there, so I invited my family out of obligation. While the best man, Jim, 35 male, noticed a receipt from a jewelry store slipped out of Todd's pocket. Jim confronted Todd about this, which led to an argument. Jim told me everything, and I told Todd that he was no longer going to be a groomsman because I knew he was going to propose at my wedding. Todd cried to our parents, which led to a blowout. In my parents' eyes, since Todd never admitted that he was going to propose to Lucy at my wedding, I was unfairly judging him. I refused and brought up Todd's past behavior. My parents couldn't refute this and got Todd to agree to not try anything at my wedding. This wasn't enough to convince me to let him be a groomsman, but I warned him that if, as a guest, he'd try anything, I would make him regret it. Fast forward to the wedding, and surprise, surprise, Todd walked over to Lucy and proposed to her during Michelle's father-daughter dance, and did so in a way that everyone would notice. Cue my revenge. Jim and I had hired a woman to pretend to be Todd's side piece, who cornered Todd and Lucy and claimed that she was pregnant with his baby. Todd denied this, but when she called his phone, I gave her his number and messed with Todd's phone to incriminate him. It didn't look good. Lucy threw the ring back at Todd and left in tears. When Todd saw the smile on my face, he knew that it was me, and I didn't respond to a single call/text from him or my parents until after the honeymoon. Lucy had thrown Todd's stuff out and has been denying access to their kid. Todd is furious and demanding that I clear his name. I sent him a text saying that I had no idea what he was talking about, as well as a screenshot of a bill for the wedding, and gave a vague message about demanding reimbursement for half of the wedding costs. Michelle knew the whole time what I was planning and gave me the green light after Todd ruined her moment with her dad. So I felt pretty good, but now even Abby thinks I went too far. So, you want to snoop on your daughter's texts? So I'm married to a wonderful woman. She's smart, funny, and very kind. Her mother is generally very nice and tends to have a great attitude and be very enjoyable, but a bit of a prude. But again, generally enjoyable. However, can be a bit of a major snoop. If my wife leaves her phone sitting around, she will just pick it up and start going through it. My wife has kind of laughed this off as a remnant of her mom being controlling when she was a kid. I'm not a fan of this because my wife and I will sometimes text about things that simply don't involve her mother, and I don't feel that that's her business at all. So, over Christmas, I saw my wife set her phone down on the kitchen counter, and I had a brilliant idea. Her mom was still in the kitchen, and I sent my wife the most sexually depraved text about all the things I was going to do to her when everyone left. Honestly, most of them are things that we haven't even done, but I had to make it extra scarring. I sent this text from the bathroom, and maybe it was my imagination, but I could swear I could hear an audible gasp shortly after her phone went off. When I went out, her mother absolutely would not look me in the eye, then not so discreetly asked her daughter to come talk to her in the other room. When my wife came back into the living room, I thought she'd been crying. However, upon closer inspection, she was laughing. Her mother had questioned her about me sexually abusing her, and if I always talked down to her like that. My wife had told her kindly that what we do between us is between us and us only. Probably the best gift this Christmas.